Hi everybody, hopefully you can hear me. I am still getting these technical difficulties worked out. I had to restart my computer a couple times in order to try to get things working right again. It was weirdly weird. Right up until 10 o'clock, everything was working fine, and then all of a sudden the bottom dropped out on it. I really don't know what's going on. But I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, there's some funky stuff going on the internet for sure. I'm starting DAZ Studio and then I'll switch over to my screen and hopefully you guys don't experience buffering that's too bad. I'm really not sure what is going on, but if I can't get it working right, then I'll reschedule for another time because obviously that's not going to be helpful to you guys if you can't see what I'm doing. Um, all right. Just going to open up a scene real quick and then I'll switch over. Actually, I don't want to open that scene. I'm going to start you guys off at the beginning so that you can, yeah. All right. And then I'm going to set DAZ to always be on top so I can see the chat while I'm working with you guys. Because it's really important to me to be able to see questions as I am putting them out there. Oh man, working on the smaller monitors killing. All right. There we go. Get the chat to be decent size so I can see what's going on. It's good. And now I should be ready to share screen. Just make sure that what I'm showing you in DAZ is the right thing. DAZ never wants to cooperate when it comes to the layout, so I'll just have to wing it on that part. All right. So hopefully everything is still good. I see the chat. I see DAZ. So let me go ahead and share screens and we'll get started. Sorry about the delay, everybody. If you didn't check the chat, I have been experiencing some pretty severe technical difficulties. It was to the point where I couldn't even get on the DAZ forums. The internet connection was so bad. So streaming was really not even possible. So I'm sharing my screen now. You guys should see my screen because I scrunched DAZ down a bit. It doesn't want to show the full viewport here, so I'm just gonna, I'll tell you what, I'll expand this part out for right now. Just someone chat in if you can see my screen, and then I'll know that I can get started. Well, that's not good. So we're not no one can see my screen yet, huh? That's definitely not good. Alrighty, well, stop sharing screens then. Go back in and check out what's going on with OBS. Oh, looks like it just tried to start the chat over. That's not good. Oh, looks like we dropped a lot of frames. But it says we're still going. So I'm gonna just, oh, you can see it. You can see it. Okay, awesome. Well, then I will go back and get back to sharing my screen again. So, all right. Probably what's going on is there's probably a delay into the stream. And so when I'm talking, you guys probably aren't hearing me for like 30 seconds or so, which is probably the reason why um, we were having that disconnect. But I'm glad you guys can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And the first thing I want to start on is the idea of the gobo. So this is kind of an advanced topic in the sense that you already really need to know how to use the script, which I covered in the two tutorial videos that are on the product page. So what I want to talk about is, some advanced tips that have to do with getting the most out of the product. And one of those is using your own images to create more complex lighting effects. So I have a gobo shader that is on some of the materials for the planes, and you can make your own images to be seen through the quote unquote windows. Um, so, this is an example of such a scene. This is just a product from Stonemason. I've set up a render, and the important thing about this render is you want to make sure that you have a beauty pass set up in the canvases. That's under advanced for render settings, advanced, and then canvases. You enable the canvases and then you just click the plus button. That creates a beauty pass. That would become an EXR file when you save it out. And as far as the basic render settings, all I have going on here is the aspect ratio is 1:1 and the resolution is 1024 by 1024. So this is not terribly huge in terms of its texture. And it could be any scene that you want to see through a window, or that you want to add reflections to your object, or even change the complexity of the lighting of your object. So the only other thing that I would say is if you're going to use it for a window, you probably are going to want to view in a straight on mode. So I just clicked straight on the right, and then I just framed it up to be about the height that a window would be in the scene. So I then rendered it, and the environmental settings here, I use the sun sky. So if you have dome and scene, and you don't have any images loaded over here under environmental map, it'll default to the sun sky. And so I just used the sun sky here. I have the longitude set, the time of day, the day, and a couple other settings here. The haze and the sun glow intensity are changed. But basically, it's just the sun sky. And that'll just give us, some image in the background because it is rendering the dome right now. I'll come back to that and talk more about that in a future video. But I just wanted to say what I end up with as a result of this is your standard DAZ render. But then I also end up with a canvas that's automatically saved out. And that canvas is an EXR file. And if you don't know what an EXR file, it's basically the same thing as an HDR file. It's a 32-bit image. It contains a lot more information than you can get in a regular 8-bit image like a PNG or a JPEG. And that can be used for lighting. So we're going to use that for the next thing that we're going to do. So now that you basically know what I did to set this up, I'm going to go ahead and open up a different scene. So I don't want to save this. I've got a bunch of scenes in my desktop that are made for this particular thing, and I'm just going to grab a really simple scene. So this one has already a plane in it. I'm just going to delete the plane out. And it just has a ground and a sphere and a camera. So what I want to do is, just like I would normally do with Lighting Designer, I'm going to switch over to using my geometry editor. And then I'm just going to click on the sphere to make sure it's a selected object, and then click to select a polygon. And this is the polygon where I'm going to be lighting. So the plane is going to be created off in space, pointing directly at this polygon. And of course, all the other polygons around it will get lit as well. But this one here is the one that the primary focus is going to be on. And this is the angle and everything that the plane is going to be on. So that's all pretty straightforward. So what I want to do is load the script. And because of the way it's set up here in the smart content, probably the easiest way of doing it is to switch over to the products tab and then just go to all products and type in lighting. And did I spell that right? That doesn't look like it came up right. Let me try that again. Oh boy, I'm full of technical issues today, huh? That was working before as well. I really don't know what's going on. It was working just a few minutes ago. I was testing it and everything. Oh, I've got the sphere selected. Maybe that's what's causing the problem. Let me go back up to all products. Yeah, there it is, Lighting Designer. Okay, so I have utilities, and this is where the script is. So I do need the sphere to be selected. And I'll just collapse this for right now. The only thing that's important to know about this scene, it's a real simple scene, but the one thing that you should know is that the exposure value is set really low right now. It's a exposure value of 6. I'm going to set it to 6.5, which is that standard studio default that I've talked about in the previous videos. And then I'm just going to collapse that so that we can focus. And that was interesting. I guess I accidentally clicked on a different polygon when I was collapsing that side over. So now that I've got this selected, the polygon is selected, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the Lighting Designer Create Fill script. We've already seen this before, and because this is set to an EV of 6.5, that means that the one that we're going to want to be using is the Plain Studio. We also have Plain Outdoor, that would be for an EV of 13. So I have a number of ones in here that I could put in, but the one I'm looking for is going to be called the Gobo. So I have a number of Gobo ones. I have softbox Gobo, and I have horizontal lines and random and just a regular softbox Gobo. So I'm just going to go with the standard softbox Gobo. And I'm just going to set this to the default distance of 100 centimeters. So I'm not worried about where this is. I'm not viewing it in iRay yet, so I'm just going to hit accept because I already know what's going on with this scene. Hopefully you guys can still see my screen and you're following along with what I'm doing. So now that I have that, I can just deselect that. I don't need that selected anymore because it's just that little yellow dot is gonna mess with my ability to see what I want to see. So I'm just right clicking and just coming over here to geometry selection and choosing the clear selection. All right, so that's fine. And if I don't even want to see this white outline around this, I can always come back over here to my scene tab, just click off here in the gray space, and that way I'm not even seeing that, so that I'm just focusing on what's going on out here when I go into iRay. So I'm going to go into iRay, and you're going to see there's the Gobo. All right, so it's basically right now just a simple grid. The idea of this is that it's going to be dividing the space up, however you want. And right now it's got a softbox that's filling that shape. And that's the standard default way that the shader comes in. The reason why I say that we want to customize it using the previous render that I showed you, the one with stonemason scene with the tree and all, is because we can do that. We can make this window view be whatever we want it to be. And so this is one of the advanced things that you can do with this. So now that we've seen what this looks like, I'm just going to come back over here and switch back to texture shaded for a second because we're not going to need that rendering while we're making changes to the material. And I'm going to come to the autofill plane. That's this guy right here. And I'm going to go to surfaces. Now there's a number of surface settings for this, as you can see here. Some of these are controlling the window element. You can see these ones here that go from like a light value to a red value. These are the ones that are controlling the tiling and the size of the window and all that kind of stuff. I've actually, right now I'm showing all the hidden display, so I'm just going to turn that off so that you can see it the way you normally would see. So that's more like what you would normally see. All right, so as you can see, there's only one image here, and it's in the luminance. And basically what you would want to do is take this softbox image that comes in the shader by default and replace it with whatever image that you have. So like I said, I already have one, so I'm just going to go ahead and go to Browse. And in this case, I put it on the desktop. So I'm going to go into the live stream demos. And you can see there's a folder here that was automatically created as a result of rendering with that canvas called Gobo Window View Canvases. It would be named whatever the file is, and then it would have _ canvases in the name. This is where the EXR is saved, and it would have a name something like whatever your file name is. Then it would have Canvas1 Beauty. That would be the name of it. Now this is a raw EXR file, and it has a lot of information in it, and it is not properly exposed. So you could use this. However, it may not give good results. So what I did was I took it and I tone mapped it. Well, I didn't really tone map it, but what I did was I changed the exposure of it using Affinity Photo. That's the photo editing software that I like to use. I've talked about this in previous live streams, how to do this. And as a result, I have an EXR that's significantly smaller. And I use the compression for the EXR file of DWAA. That's the compression that you want to use for your EXR files. The reason why is because the DWAA compression is a lossy compression. It doesn't reduce your bit depth, but what it does do is it will reduce the amount of information that the file contains, very much like a JPEG does. A JPEG is also a lossy compression format. And you can see that, we drop off a significant amount of data as a result, but we don't lose that 32-bit luminance quality of the EXR file. So I do recommend that if you're going to try this trick, that you take it into Photoshop or GIMP or whatever program that you have that can handle 32-bit files, and then just map the exposure. And all I did was set it to -13, which was the exposure for the scene. And then I just saved it back out as an EXR file using the compression of DWAA. So once I have that selected, I can open that. That would then go into the luminance. So you won't see it. The DWAA, for whatever reason, doesn't give a good preview, but that's okay. I can live with that. That's not a problem. You can also make this effect more complex, and I'll come back and show that to you in just one second. But I'm going to switch back over here to iRay so that you can see. So there's my scene, right? And you can see it's shining on the ball through the window panes, right, of the gobo. And you can see there the tree and all that in the reflections, and plus the color changes. The whole tonality of the entire lighting changes. And so that's a really advanced thing that you can do very simply by simply rendering up whatever scene you want and then dropping it in the luminance slot using everything that I just got done talking about. So that's a really advanced thing that you can do with this. And then if you wanted to, you could come into the surfaces for this and you could change the settings. So like I said, you could change the number of rows. Right now it's 4 rows by 4 rows. So I could say, okay, well, in this particular case, I only want 2 rows. So I'm going to hit 2 and then tab. And now you're going to see that it changes. So the division changes. Now, the way it's set up is that the height of the border and the width of the border will automatically conform to percentages of whatever is available based on the number of columns and rows. So if I set this to 2 and 2, you'll see that the borders don't automatically get thicker. They stay the same ratio. But now we just have a standard window, a division, one division by another division. And, if this isn't bright enough or whatever, I can always just come over here and crank this up. So maybe I'll set this to 3000 and then hit tab and you can see now it's brighter and you can see that. And if I wanted the borders to be wider, I could adjust the borders, do whatever I want. This is 100% customizable to get exactly the effects that you're looking for. And this is a great way of quickly adding, a fake window to a scene. If you just want to get some really complex lighting. Now I said before you could make this even better, and one of the ways that you could make it better is you could take the PNG that's rendered out as part of this, and let me just get out of iRay real quick because I don't like making major changes to the shader while iRay is rendering because it will really slow down. And right now I'm using the GPU for doing the video as well, so. One thing that you can also do here, by the way, and I should explain this if you're not aware of Kelvin color temperature, right now the default for this is 5000, and that's fairly warm. If you want the colors to be exactly the way that you rendered, then you would set it for 6500 or 6500. That is the standard default white point for like just white, what they call daylight. So when you do that, you'll see it grays out. It's not white like it was before. That means that's the default setting. You could also just come over here and hit reset, and that'll do the same thing. And that'll neutralize the color cast. There was a slight warm color cast that was created as a result of that. But like I said before, we can do something that makes this even stronger, and that's come over here to the emission color and use the PNG. So I'm just going to go back over here to that PNG that was created like any normal render, and I'm going to drop that here into the emission color. And what this is going to do is it's going to reinforce what's going on with the luminance. So the luminance is providing the light, the emission color is providing the color, and this will just make the whole effect stronger. So I'm going to come back over here, and you can see the coloration of it is much stronger. And what I do now is now that everything is much stronger, I can just come over here and really crank up the luminance. So maybe I'll do something like 10,000, just to really brighten that up. Maybe that's too much. Maybe 7,500. That'll probably get me there. And you can see how blue this is, right? Well, that's the blue sky. So if I didn't want it that blue, that's where the Kelvin temperature would kick in. So let's say I wanted to really warm up everything. I could take it down to like 3,000, which is really warm. And you can see how everything warms up. So, a lot of flexibility built into the shader, not even counting, the number of rows and all this kind of stuff that you can change. And you can see all that in the manual. But just by taking your own image and dropping it in there. And by the way, you don't even need the window frame thing. You could just set it to 1 and 1. And by doing that, you've effectively made the plane into just nothing more than just a portal that is showing that image. There's no window pane on this. There's no frame. It's just one pane. You can think of it like a sliding glass door that you would find on a lanai or something like that. It's just one plane. And again, this is, if you don't want a fake window, maybe you want a fake door or something. This is a way that you could do that. It's just set the number of rows and columns to 1 and 1 and set the border width to 0 and 0, and you'll end up with an open door or something along those lines. And you can change the temperature of it, warmer or cooler, until you get exactly what you want. And you can change, you can even tint it a bit by changing the emission color. And like I said, if this is too strong, then you could always just come back over here and set this back to none. And you'll see that calms it down. It doesn't get as much color into it. So hopefully you can see the difference of with the color and without the color. But the important thing is that the EXR file has to go into the luminance. That's really, really important. If you don't do that, then you won't get accurate lighting. Hopefully everyone's still with me and the stream hasn't died. Please chat in if you are, because I really need to know that I'm not talking to dead air right now. All right, so enough of that. I just wanted to start with that because that was like something really cool that the product can do that I think a lot of people are haven't even considered or thought about. But it really has nothing to do with anything as far as like actually using the product. I just wanted to talk about that because I built that into the product for the Gobo. It's capable of a lot of different looks, but one of the coolest things that you can do with it is just set it up to be a fake window or a fake door. All right, enough of that. Let's get into some actual scenes here. So I'm going to not bother saving this scene, and we're going to go into, I have one here. And I'm not seeing anybody chat in, so... oh, awesome. All right, perfect. So I will, I'm going to be using an actual scene here, and it's a little bothersome because right now I had to keep very informative. Good. I'm glad you like it. Hopefully you get more out of the product as a result of seeing that. There's other things that I want to talk about that you can do. I mean, you can do a lot with these shaders. They're built for you to really go crazy and make your own thing, but that really is kind of aside from the purpose of the whole product. So the real purpose of the product is something like this. So what I'm going to do here is instead of rendering the preview render on this, I'm just going to come over here and do a quick render so that we can compare before and after. And the important thing to understand about this scene is that it's using kind of the same thing that I was doing before. It's got draw dome on, so I'm using the sun sky because I don't have an environment map. I set the environment resolution up. It doesn't matter so much with the sun sky, but I did it anyway. I have a slight rotation here because I wanted to place the sun sky shadows to create an interesting look on his face. Well, instead of me talking about it, let me just go ahead and do a preview render. So so you can see this before I do the final render. And then I have sun glow intensity and a little bit of haze just to give it some character and to sort of change up the environment. Sun sky is great. I mean, it does a lot of really great things. It's super fast rendering, and it creates really interesting shadow and light patterns, but it has this really big problem. And the big problem is that it creates these really, really dark shadows that you can't get any detail out of, especially with the way a lot of PAs set up their materials on their fabric. It tends to be very dark and you lose a lot of detail. So Lighting Designer, one of the major functions of Lighting Designer is to deal with that exact problem. To get some extra fill into these dark shadow areas, right? So that's the main purpose of Lighting Designer, I would say. Like if you were to say what's the main purpose, that would be the main purpose. So I'm just going to do a quick render, It doesn't need to be, anything dramatic. I'm just gonna render it up. It should only take a few seconds to render, because I'm not gonna try to get like a finished product out of it. I just want to be able to have something on screen so I can show you a before and after of how you would use the product to deal with this specific problem of fill lighting in a a scene where you're using sun sky, or you're using an HDR environment lighting that has a really strong sun that's creating these really deep shadows, and you're not getting enough bounce light back into the shadows to create the detail that you need, or the well, okay, while this is rendering, I guess I should talk. So in traditional world, in photography and cinematography, fill lighting is used to control shadows. That's what it is for. It's meant exclusively. People get confused on this topic, but fill lighting is 100% always about controlling shadows, and that's all it's there for. It's not meant for anything else. People will get confused and they'll talk about just sort of adding light overall to the scene or something. That's not what lighting is for. This is probably good. That'll do. So let me just see what that render looks like. It won't let me come up because of the fact that I have right now I have DAZ always on top. So there we go. That's the render. So you can see what I'm talking about. Really deep, dark shadows, particularly down here under the eyes. And we're losing all the detail in the outfit. That's just no good, right? But overall, I'm happy with the exposure of the scene. And the detail of the background is fine, because I'm going to do a distance canvas and then composite in post some smoke and debris in the background. So what I really want to do here is I just want to add some light into these shadows. And they do this in movies. They do this in photography all the time, because when you're working under natural light, meaning sunlight, you really have to control your shadows. If you don't, then you're going to end up with, everything getting kind of clogged up and just not looking good. So that's what Lighting Designer is meant for. I mean, it's primarily meant for controlling your shadows. Like any good fill light, Lighting Designer is meant for that purpose. Now that said, I already have a camera. I have everything set up. So all I need to do now is just add a fill light. Now I have a number of choices that I can do when I'm thinking about working with Lighting Designer. The first thing is I definitely want to make my selection based off of Michael, because he's the thing that I want to light. So I'm just going to come out here into perspective view and navigate around. So I know where the problem is. The problem is the shadow, and it's right here on this side of his face. So what I need to do is I need to really get in there and get to the place where I can just pick one polygon. We talked about this in the previous videos that I did talking about the software, but I didn't talk about why you would use it, what it's meant for, how this can solve problems for you and make your renders better. I mean, that's really what this is all about. So I'm going to go to wireframe, or hidden line is the one I like. There's a lot of different choices, but hidden line gives me the look that I'm after in terms of seeing the polygons. So that would be the one I'd probably recommend. And again, like I said, the major area that was the problem area for me was this side of the face, particularly on this side of the nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a selection right there. And that's telling me that, that's the place where I'm going to be, shooting my light off into space, but pointing right here. That's where I'm going, because that was the place where I really wanted to get more information. If I wanted to focus more on, say, the suit, for instance, then I could make a polygon selection on the suit, and that would be fine. But for me, I'm focusing primarily on getting more information into his face. So once I have that selection, I can switch back to the main camera. And the reason why I switched to perspective view is because you can see how big that circle is for the brush that's painting out the selection. If I zoom in using my main camera, then I lose the current settings that I have for my camera. So I switch to perspective mode for that reason. Now, once I have that selection, what I can do is I can switch over to iRay and preview what I'm going to be getting. So there's a lot of choices that you can have when it comes to placing your fill object. You have reflectors, which is traditionally what would be used in photography. You can think of like a Sports Illustrated. Hold on for 1 second. I'm just going to take a sip of tea because my voice is cracking. So if you think about like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit shoot that you see all the time, that would be something that you'll see someone standing out there holding up like a foam board plane or something like that, and they're reflecting the sunlight so that the model doesn't have these deep dark shadows. And Lighting Designer does basically the exact same thing, or at least it has the option of doing the same thing. So I'm just going to come over here, back into my product, Smart Content, and Lighting Designer Create Fill. And the reason why I have iRay rendering is so that we can see this interactively. So here I want to use plain outdoor because this is an outdoor scene. It's not exactly an EV of 13. I think the EV on this is 12. But this will do just fine. It'll be a little brighter than it would be normally, but it's not a problem. We can always change it after the fact. And you can see we have a lot of choices here. And these all are emissive, meaning they're actually going to emit light. And most of these are going to also create reflections. So if I had like a shiny object in the scene and I didn't want to see a reflection in it, the one that I would probably pick is this ghost emitter. That's the one that you really want to use for the process of lighting something without creating reflections. Because you can see here in the thumbnail, there's no reflection on the sphere. It's just lighting it, but it's not adding any reflections. All the rest of these are going to add reflections. And so, if you want to add an emitter to a scene, then this is the way to go. Now, we also have non-emissive. And the non-emissive are going to be reflectors. The standard white reflector, well, let me just back up for a second and explain all of this. So when you're working with photography in the real world, they sell kits for reflectors. And the kits usually come with 4 colors. You have a white reflector, a silver reflector, a gold reflector, and a black reflector. And the black reflector is sometimes referred to as a flag. And the idea of this one is a little different than the rest of these. But the rest of these are all going to reflect light into, wherever you're pointing that reflector at. So the white reflector is going to be the strongest. This is going to be the one that's really going to kick a lot of light into this. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a white reflector to this scene. And you're going to see that it's going to add a significant amount of light. Now, what's going on here is it looks like the plane is being created up there because of the nose. And you can see I'm getting a little light on the side of the face right here as a result of that. And it's not very strong, right? This is a very subtle look. The silver reflector and the gold reflector are even more subtle. The difference between them is that they're going to be cool or warm in terms of reflector. And then the black reflector is going to absorb most of the light that hits the reflector, which is going to deepen the shadows. And the black absorber is even stronger than that. So this one will absorb all the light that hits it. And as a result, it will make your shadows the darkest. So like I said, this is often referred to as a flag when they talk in photographic terms or cinematographic terms, where they'll put a black absorbing object in an area where they want to deepen the shadows. Now, that's not what I want to do here. And you can see that the reflector really isn't getting the job done. Now, I could move the reflector a little closer, and that might help. I could also reposition it into a different area, and that might help. But what I could do instead is simply come over here and hit reset and try an emitter instead. And here what I'll do is I'll probably start with a softbox. So I'm just going to go all the way over here to the regular softbox. Actually, you know what? I'll do the umbrella with hotspot. I like the umbrella with hotspot. It's one that you see a lot in outdoor shoots. And this one happens to be set fairly cool, so it'll mimic the color of the sky to some degree. So I'm just going to go ahead and click and add that one in. And you'll see it re-render. There's the plane right there coming in the corner. And like I said, I can move this closer, but you can see how much more light this adds. So this is an emitter. It's not a reflector, it's an emitter. But what this does is it really adds a fill. It fills in those deep shadow areas, and it makes them have a lot more life and detail. So that's really the purpose. That's the point of Lighting Designer. I mean, when you really strip everything else away, that's the point. Now, I could make this a little closer, so maybe I'll make this something like 80. I think that'll be close enough without. I'm going to hit Tab instead of Enter. Yeah, 80 is too close. So let's try 90. Hit Tab. There we go. It's just off camera. That's basically what you want. And if I didn't like the umbrella with hotspot, I could try one of the others. Like I said, if there was a metallic object in the scene, I could then use the ghost plane instead, and that would give me come on, where is it? There it is. There's the ghost plane right there. The ghost plane would not give any reflections, but it would give that illumination. It's not very natural, but it can be very useful. The other thing that's useful about the ghost plane is you can put it on camera and you won't see it. So I'm just going to hit accept to accept that. and good enough. So I just want to show you the before and after. You probably saw it already, but it's always good to be able to just really compare. What is the purpose? Why are we doing it? And this will only take a few minutes. So while I'm talking about that, um, let's come back to the concept of the reflectors. So an important thing to understand about reflectors is they are more natural. They're very subtle in the way that they do their thing. Particularly for close-up photography, you can get them really close to the faces, and they give a really natural look. And if you're trying to mimic a real photography setup in the real world, then the reflectors are the way to go. It's important to understand, though, that reflectors will take longer to render. A golden rule of working in Iray, or really any render engine, but particularly in a PBR render engine like Iray, is the more light you give it, the faster the render will be. So the darker the render is, the slower it'll be, or the noisier it'll be, I suppose is probably a better way of putting it. And so if you put an emitter in the scene, you're adding light to the scene, which means that things are going to render quicker. Whereas if you put a reflector in a scene, it's not adding light to the scene, it's simply bouncing light around. And the more objects that you have in the scene to bounce light around, the slower everything gets because it has to calculate all those bounces. You put a reflector in a scene, you're just adding bounces. So you can see, it's even rendering faster now, so that's good enough. I just wanted to have that. So I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison now. Come on, that one and that one. There you go. So let's get this one down a bit so you can compare and you can see the before and after. So pretty dramatic, right? Just adding one fill light, we added significantly to, particularly on the side of the nose where the plane was set to light, but also on the side of the face. And we added a little bit here on the shoulder. And it's not super dramatic. We could always power it up, but that's the point of a fill light is not to light per se. You can use the autofill for that, but it's not really meant for that. That's not how these planes were calibrated. They were calibrated to do this, to fill in shadow area, to add light and detail into the shadow area. That's the purpose of them. And like I said, because this is an emitter, it's going to put a lot more light in the scene. It's going to render faster, which is good, right? If you want your renders to render faster, that's another advantage of using Lighting Designer is you'll get faster renders. And then, of course, you saw how precise the placement was. I know exactly where it's pointing. It's lighting exactly what I want it to light. And of course, it's catching light on the same pixels everywhere else. So you can just see, this is great. Maybe this goes too far, right? Maybe this becomes too bright. Well, that's where you would go back in. And again, like I said, the EV here is a little bit low on this, right? The EV is 12, and these were calibrated for an EV of 13. I could bump the EV up to 13, and that would bring this plane into alignment, or I could just come over here to the autofill plane, go to surfaces, and then I could adjust the luminance that this is putting out. Now, the important thing to understand here is that there's two luminances for any of these that are based on this hotspot concept. There's the luminance of the image, which is the umbrella, and then there's a hotspot, and that can be any image that you want. And this can be moved around. The hotspot can be moved, it can be resized, and it can be placed anywhere on this plane that you want it to be. But the important thing to understand is that this also has its own luminance. So if I change the luminance on this, it may not necessarily be exactly what I want because I put too many zeros there. So I just took it was 13, so I just took it down to 10. And here I'm going to take this one down to say 4. So I'm just going to hit tab on that to accept those values. And if I do a quick render again on that, so this will be a little bit softer. Actually, you know what? In order to really make this obvious, let me take it down even lower. Let me take this down to like 7 so that you can really see the difference, because if it's not real super obvious, you might not catch it. Obviously, you can dial these in however you want, but it is important that you see the difference so that you can understand why you might want to do the same things. So you can see here, the shadows are deeper. Now we're still getting some of that fill light in there. So you'll see the difference. The before render is still going to be significantly darker. But here we're keeping some of the drama. We're really dialing in the shadows, and we're keeping some of that information. Now I could also have done the same thing by moving the plane further away. That's another option. Instead of changing the exposure or changing the luminance settings for the plane, I could simply move it further away. And that ties into something called the inverse square fall off law. And the idea of that is that the further you move away an unfocused emitter, the more area that emitter covers. And for every unit of measurement, let's say a meter. So we put this at 100 centimeters, which is 1 meter. So if we were to put this at 200 centimeters, which would be 2 meters, we would end up with the light being half as strong, but covering 4 times as much area. That's the inverse fall-off law. And it can be useful if you're working in lighting a large group of objects or a large object, then you want to pull it back further so that you can light more area. Whereas if you want to really focus the light, you want to get it as close to the object as you can. And again, that will affect the perceived power of the light source. So you really have 3 options. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the side-by-side thing again here so that you can see exactly what I was talking about. So here you can see, it's lighter than this is, but it has more of that shadow character than the last one. And it's perfect. I mean, this is about exactly what I would want. I would want just this much information to make it in. I'd want those shadows, but I don't want this where everything's clogged up. I want there to be some information that I can make out in this area. Now, this isn't all I would do in this particular scene. Maybe I would leave that there. So I'll just close this one because I don't need to save that for right now. And I'm going to add another autofill object. And so what I'll do is I'll just come back out again. And I have to have Michael selected. That's important. And I'm going to go over to my perspective view. And, we still have the side of the nose selected there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate up. And I'm going to put a plane that's going to be shining from underneath. And I have a number of polygons that I can choose from. I'll just switch back over so you can see. You don't need to go into the hidden line mode. It just makes it easier to see. So I have a number of polygons. I could choose the bottom of the nose, for instance. I could choose like the bottom of the arm. But since I know what I'm trying to light is going to be the underside of like these eyes in particular, I can just go ahead and just click one of those. Right, I got 2 polygons that time. That's no good. So I'm just going to get 1 polygon. That's good. And now I can switch back over into my main camera. And this would be a good example of when you would want to use a ghost plane. So I'm just going to switch back over here to iRay. And this is obviously going to be on camera because this is going to be fairly low. The most important thing to understand about this, if you're going to do this approach, is that you want to make sure that you don't have any intersections, or at least you try to minimize the intersections if you can. You'll see in a second what I'm talking about. So I'm going to come over here to Lighting Designer, Create Fill. I'm going to take another sip of tea real quick while that's doing its thing. This is a fairly heavy scene because this is a big background from Stonemason. So if you haven't seen, I like Stonemason stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab any of these. It doesn't matter which one, because I just want to show you how it's going to end up on camera. So if I click, you're going to see it's going to be down low, and it's going to be on camera. In this particular case, that's okay. That's just fine. As a matter of fact, I can probably set this to be a little closer, so maybe like 85, and hit tab. And that's fine. As long as it's not going into his knee or whatever, that's fine. Now, I can move this after the fact, but you can see that this is pointing light up right under the eyes. So, that's basically what I wanted. Now, if I didn't like this position, or maybe I was catching too much of the knee or something along those lines, I could instead do a plane that's directly facing. So I'll just hit reset to get rid of that and hit cancel, and I'll make a different selection, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll come back over to textured. Actually, let me just go to hidden line so you can really see what I'm doing. We'll go to perspective view. And maybe in this case, I want something that's going to be coming from, maybe we'll go to the side so that we're not going to catch a lot of light on the arm, or at least it'll be blocked from the camera. So I'll do, something like that. So I'm going to put a little light. It's going to be coming from underneath, but it's going to be like right there, maybe. Actually, you know what? I'll do this one right there. that's right on the bridge of the nose. I think that's good. So I'm just gonna go back to texture shaded, switch back over here to my main camera. And you can't even see that from this angle. We could never make that selection from that angle. That's the reason why I do that adjustment. So now that I've got that, I can switch back over here to iRay again and go back into Lighting Designer. And you'll see, the plane is going to be positioned over in that space. So if you don't get the positioning that you want, that's one of the advantages of this, is that you're not sitting there going, oh man, I really don't know what I want. You just make a different selection and go to town. So I'll use the same one before. In this case, I accidentally clicked on that twice, and I'll show you what happens. If you click on it twice, you're going to create two planes, and they're going to be right on top of each other, and that's going to create problems. So I'm just going to hit reset on that, and you'll see if I hit cancel now, and I come over here to my scene. Oh, I didn't click twice. I thought I clicked twice on that one. I guess I was kind of stuttering a little bit with my click, but that was actually fine. So I'll just go back and try again. I'm going to click once. If you get two planes, you have to delete the extra plane from your scene. Is basically what I was about to show you, but it doesn't look like it's a big problem here. So I've run into that problem before. So here the plane is, it's off camera. You can see it's right there. And it's pretty strong, right? Now, again, that inverse square fall off rule basically says that I could move it further away, and that would make it weaker. Or what I could do is I could make a reflector instead. That would be viable. But what I really want to do is I really want to get this close. I want to get this as close as I can get it to the figure. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit reset. And I'm going to come over here and choose ghost. And what you're going to see is that we're going to add the ghost plane. You can see it out here in the OpenGL viewport. But as soon as I get it on camera, it's going to disappear. And so I'm going to set this to maybe 50 and hit tab. And so it's on camera. You can see it in the OpenGL viewport. But as soon as it gets into the iRay preview, it's not there anymore. And this is adding all that light into the scene. We can get it as close as we want. The most important thing is that we do not add intersections. That's the most important thing. But I'm going to leave that on camera because I'm actually okay with that. So now, if I wanted to, what I could do is I could come over here to the surfaces. For that one, this is the autoplane 2, and I'll just collapse this again. I know that's kind of a pain that I keep bouncing back and forth, but for whatever reason, it wasn't responding properly. So I just decided to start the stream. Autofill plane 2. Here it is. So this one is based on the ghost shader. So it has a lot less parameters. It basically only has the luminance, the emission temperature, and the emission color. Those are primarily what it is. You pretty much never want to use two-sided light for one of these. And you can really only tell where it is in a scene by these white brackets, but you can't see it in the iRay scene. So in this case, let's say that I really wanted to warm this up. So I'm going to drop this down to like 3,000 for the Kelvin temperature. That's going to really, really warm it up. It's going to be the same temperature as like a spotlight. You can see how warm that is. And that's adding some warm reflection into his skin, which is really nice. And then maybe I decide that this is too strong. Maybe what I want to do is I want to do, instead of 67,000, I'm going to do 60,000 and hit tab. And that's just going to calm it down a bit so that it's not so strong, because it is pretty close to the figure. And I want it close to the figure because I don't want the light to go everywhere. I just want the light to go on him. And maybe the warmth here is a little too warm. So maybe I'll do like 35 and hit tab. And we'll call that a day on this. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. Let's go to texture shaded. And then we'll do another preview render so that we can compare before and after. And the ghost emitter doesn't create reflections on any reflective surface, whether it be his eyes or if he has any metallic objects on his costume. It doesn't create that. So it's really, really useful for adding light to an area without changing the reflections in that area. But in this case, what I used it for was, yes, to add a little bit of light into that area, but to also add some color into that area so that it changes the coloration of that. Now, of course, this is also going to go into areas like the fist, the arm, the hair, even part of the outfit here is going to be warmed up a bit from that. And again, remember what I told you before, the these objects that emit light are going to make everything render faster. The ghost plane is an example where that's not necessarily true. And the reason why is because the ghost plane has transparency. The cutout transparency is what makes a ghost plane a ghost plane. And as a result, let me just grab another sip of tea here. As a result of that, that cutout opacity, light has to go through that ghost plane. And that cutout opacity always slows down your renders. It's one of the reasons why hair slows down your renders so much. It's not because of the extra geometry, it's because of all the cutout opacities. Leaves are the same way. So this is one of the reasons why the D-Force hair and the D-Force grass are such a big improvement, is because you don't have that cutout opacity anymore, which will speed up your renders and also give you better quality. So, here's the before and after, right? So you can see, we got some warmth and some extra light up in here and into this eye, which is what I was shooting for. So I had some light coming over here, and I want to keep, some of that edginess, right? So I don't want to have a huge amount of light coming from the front. I don't want to have like a headlamp where I have light coming in straight from the front that's killing that edginess, because I want a certain amount of moodiness to the character. But at the same time, I wanted to warm this up. So we have, warm on this side, cool on this side. And the ghost plane really allowed me to do that very nicely. So, and you can see, it also brought in some warmth down here. Now, maybe that's not what I want, and I can change that if I wanted to. But it does spill over. Now, what do I mean when I say you can change that? Well, there's a number of ways that you can change it. One of the easiest ways of changing it is to select the object itself and simply change the scale. Now, there is an important thing to understand about changing the scale, and that is when you change the scale, it's going to change the luminance. And the reason why is because everything is set up using the luminance units of candelas per meter square. So right now, this is a 1 meter square plane. So if I were to come over here to parameters and change the scale of that to, say, 50%, which is going to make it smaller, you can see it's much smaller now. That's going to really focus the light where I want it to go, and it's not going to spill over as much out here into the belly, which is great. That's what I wanted. But what I've effectively done is I've effectively cut the surface area of this down in half. So what I would need to do in order to get the same amount of luminance is I would need to come over here and double this. Now, it's not an exact number, and the reason why it's not an exact number is because of the fact that, it's going to be more focused on one area. It may be too bright. So what I would say is, instead of doubling it, just, do a little bit less than double. So here, I'll take it from 6 to 10, and then hit enter. And we'll do another render real quick, and you'll see. So really simple solution to that problem of getting the spillover from that ghost light. And because it's a ghost light, you don't see it on camera. And you can see we're really getting that light in here, but a lot less of that light is making it down into the belly. So that's, again, one of those really simple changes that you can make. If you're seeing what you're getting and you're like, okay, yeah, I need to make a change there because I'm not happy with that, this is a simple way of getting that change. And again, I really want to reiterate, the primary focus of this product is controlling shadows. So I'm not paying attention so much to the lit areas because I was already happy with my key light. All right. So how do I explain a key light? I'm sure you guys have already heard of key lights, but I want to explain it for people who maybe are watching this later on who maybe are new to DAZ and don't understand what a key light is. But a key light is your main light, the main light source. And the sun in the sun sky is like the ultimate key light. It is the key light. It's the key light that all other key lights are based off of. So the key light is setting up all of my lighting for my scene, and that would be the sun. And what I'm doing with the fill lights is I'm compensating for the problems that the key light is creating in the shadow areas. So that's basically what autofill is all about. It's about really getting in there and controlling your shadows. I can't stress this strongly enough because it really, really matters. If you want to get good results from the script and the overall product, it's important to understand what it was created for. So you can see I've really modified. Now the background hasn't changed at all because these emitters are only keyed on the figure. You can see I've controlled that spillover on the belly to a large degree, but I've got a little extra information in here, and you can see that it's not as dark as it was here, which is fine by me. I've got some warmth on this side of the face. I've got some detail in this eye, so it's not all black like it was before. I've got some nice fill into these areas of the shadow, so it's not, you know, blocking the detail, but at the same time I've still got that moodiness, and so I'm happy with that. So key light would be the sun. You know, that set up the entire of my render. Once I have my key light in place, then I can go with my fill lights and I can decide, okay, I want to modify the shadows. In this case, I put one fill light here and I put one fill light there, and I end up with a much better render. And that's it. I mean, that's really all there is to properly using these guys. Now, of course, it gets into, like I was talking about with the shaders before. You know, you have a gobo shader, you could put your own EXR image on it and make it do whatever you want. But that's basically it. I mean, that's the gist of why you would use the script, what it's good for, and how it can improve your renders really, really quickly. And I didn't have to get in there and create a plane and then put a material on it and move it around in space and all that kind of stuff. I just selected a polygon that I want to target, and boom, it's done. So that's the real beauty of using this. Now, that said, this is not the only way that you could use this, and I have another scene, so I'm not going to bother saving this, and I'm just going to go ahead and open up a different scene that I have prepared. This one presents a similar type of problems. It's actually using the same environment from a different angle, camera angle, and it's got a different costume. So the last costume is black, and that's very forgiving because you don't get a lot of reflections. This costume has some chrome elements. Pardon me, I was just sipping some more tea. So the chrome elements are going to be a problem because when you put a fill into the scene, you're going to see that in the chrome elements. Now, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes you want to add some extra light into your chrome or your metal elements. This is particularly relevant on like a product renders, like cars, where you want reflections because it really brings out the detail in the metallic areas. But this is, you know, a similar type of scene where we're going to catch a lot of shadow. I'm just going to render it by its default so we have something that we can refer back to. And I'm going to show you how useful the ghost emitter is for this particular problem of lighting it without creating reflections, because that's really what it's there for. It's there to solve this particular problem, which is you have heavy shadows. You're really killing the character and creating all kinds of issues that you don't want to create, and you need to get some extra information into these information. I mean, but you don't want there to be reflections, or at least if you have reflections, you want them to be the thing that you're seeing. So that's probably good enough. I don't need to keep rendering that. You get the point. So let me just go ahead and switch over here to the hidden line mode. And hopefully you guys are still with me, because no one's chatting in any questions, so I'm assuming that everyone's following what's going on. What I need to do is, I see that it's taken me out into the background, so I'm just going to come over here, and I need to switch my tools. So I'm just going to go to Tool Settings. I'm going to switch from Geometry Editor to the Universal, and just select her head so that I have her head selected. And I'll switch back over here to Geometry Editor in a second. But the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to take my perspective camera and key in on her face, because that's really my main focus when I'm focusing on this. There we go. There we go. So now we're focusing in on her head, which is, you can see there's the camera right there, and there we go. So I've got the head, and if you remember, the shadows were really strong underneath because we were getting a lot of sunlight coming down. So I was getting some strong shadows here, I was getting some strong shadows here, and on the face as well. So, you know, I could choose any of those spots. It really just comes down to what you like. One of the things I want to watch out for, though, is I don't want to create strong cast shadows from this fill light. That's really important, that you don't accidentally create more problems for yourself to solve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a place where I know that I'm not going to get that. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click that polygon right there. And this polygon is going to create a bunch of light into this direction, but it's not going to create cast shadows where I would see them. So that's the reason why I chose that particular polygon. So it's going to create a plane out here and it's not going to create huge cast shadows in places where I would notice them. So I'm just going to come back over here to iRay. Now that I have that, and if I don't want to see this clogging up my scene view, I can just go ahead and collapse that down and just select Victoria so that I have her all selected. And I don't need this for right now. The only thing that I would point out is because I'm using SunSky, I have the EV of 13. So it's important to know in case you are choosing between a studio lighting or the plain outdoor. So I'm going to be using the plain outdoor. And first I'll show you the ghost. So I'm going to go ahead and click the ghost. That's going to create the ghost in the scene. And you can see it's right up on her. I mean, it's at a distance of 50 centimeters. But because it's a ghost plane, you can't see it. And so I'm really light in that area that I targeted, but it's also getting light into the side of the face, a little bit on the underside of this arm here. And you know, you're not seeing anything in the chrome. We're not losing the natural reflections of the environment. So I could back that off a bit. So maybe I'll set this to like maybe 75 and hit tab just to back that off a little bit. And you know, maybe that's even still a little too close. So maybe I'll take it up to 100 and hit tab, because I don't want it to be too strong. It's a little bit too strong right now. And like I said, that inverse fall off will help just by backing it off. So you can see we got, you know, some nice light here, plenty of light over here, catching the detail. Maybe I can even take that even further. So maybe I'll take it way out to like 150. And you're still seeing it on camera, but now it's way softer, right? Way softer. And you might think, well, you know, that's not doing anything. It's doing plenty. Believe me, it's doing plenty. So I think maybe 125 is the right answer in this particular case. So there we go. That looks good. I'm going to hit accept on that. And I'm going to add another one. And this one's going to be coming from the opposite direction. But this one, I do want reflections. I want there to be some reflections on the metal so that you can see the difference. So here, I'll just come back over here to the hidden line again. And switch back over here to the perspective view. I've still got everything from what I had before, so I just want to choose a different area. So in this particular case, what I want is I want there to be a reflection over here on this side where the chrome is on the breast. And I also want to catch some light down here on the arm. And these are both on the same plane. Now, I could choose, you know, any of these polygons on the breast, depending upon what part of the breast I wanted light. Or I could choose one of the arm. And so in this case, I think I'm going to go ahead and choose one of the arm. And maybe for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and choose that polygon right there. I'm going to come over here to main and switch back over here to NVIDIA iRay. And once that's going, I'm going to go ahead and launch Lighting Designer again. And again, because we're using an EV of 13, we're using the plain outdoor. That's what these guys are calibrated for. And I have a number of different ones here that are available. I could choose any of them. But for my purposes, I usually like the umbrella. It's cool, and so it matches the skylight. The color temperature, by the way, if you're curious about what skylight is, skylight is a Kelvin temperature of 10,000. It's the all the way up, and this is a Kelvin temperature, I do believe, of 7,500. So it's fairly cool, but it's not as cool as the skylight, which means it's warmed up a little bit by, you know, maybe hitting the ground or something like that. I have umbrella with hotspot, umbrella with ring, and just a plain umbrella. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and choose plain umbrella. I'm going to click that. And this one's going to come in off camera, which is fine. And you can see, there it is. It's there on the breast. It's also lighting up some of the underside of the arm, which is obviously where I placed it. And we're also getting some light here on the belly and on this side of the leg, which is fine. That's exactly what I want. I could move it closer, so maybe I'll do something like 100 and hit tab, and it'll make everything stronger. Now you can see it also comes in on camera. So this one happens to be intersecting with the ground, and if you're ever curious about what that is, you can always just come over here and just zoom out a bit, and you'll be able to zoom out on the scene. It'll take a second. There we go. Now I'm rotating around, and you can see pretty clearly that this guy is intersecting the ground. It's not a problem because the ground, Looks like my power just went out. Yeah, hopefully I didn't knock my router out. Hopefully you guys are still there. If someone can chat in, that would be really useful. But hopefully you're still there. Anyway, I can see that that's definitely intersecting the ground, but this is fine because this is not a subsurface scattering object. As long as it's not like the skin, you don't have a problem with that. So, having that in the ground or whatever is fine. Now, if I didn't want that, what I would do is I would just hit cancel and I would change the polygon that I was selecting, or I would change the distance. In this case, I could also, if maybe I wanted to get it out of the intersecting with the ground, and I didn't care about that reflection, I could try the ghost. So here, I'll show you what the ghost looks like. So I'll just hit reset on that and then try the ghost. And you'll see we won't get that reflection here in the chrome. We'll get the light, which is fine, but we won't get that reflection in the chrome. It can look a little unnatural, and that's something that's important to understand. But like I said, that's basically it's fine in this case. All right, awesome. I'm glad you guys are still with me. But in this case, it's I want that, and it's right there. I get that nice little reflection. I'm happy with it. Everything looks good. So I'm just going to go ahead and just hit accept on that. And there it is. So now if I come over here to, let me just collapse this so that this isn't in our way. And I come over to surfaces. So I've got the autofill plane 3, which I just created, which is right here. And I come over to surfaces. This has a hotspot slot, but there's no hotspot. So I haven't put an image in this one, and hotspot luminance is set to 0, which means that this one only has 1 luminance. So let's say that that's too strong, right? So all I need to do is just come over here to luminance and just drop this down. So maybe I'll take that down from 15 to 10, hit tab, and that'll take that down. It'll tone down that reflection a bit, and we'll still get some light and catch some detail in here. It's also catching a little bit on the underside of the eye, and it's doing everything we want it to do. But again, I'm being careful not to cast shadows into places where I don't want them. That's an important thing about fill lights is you don't want to cast shadows. There's a reason why spotlights are less useful than an unfocused light like a plane. Is spotlights, if they're not set up correctly, can cast shadows, and you don't want your fill light to cast shadows. So I'm just going to go ahead and go back over here to texture shaded. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a final render so that we can compare our before and after. And again, because this has 2 fill lights in the scene, it's going to render faster now. So it should happen really quick. Yep. And you can see, we got that nice reflection on this side because we were using a regular plane. But on this side, we don't get a reflection because of the ghost. But we are getting the light. So that's the proper way of using both of those options. If you want the reflection, if you're fine with the reflection, use a regular plane. If you're not fine with the reflection, use a ghost plane. Now, I guess this will be a good opportunity for me to talk about the spotlights. Let me just take another sip of tea. So I have studio calibrated spotlights, and I have outdoor calibrated spotlights. You can use them, and they're set up exactly the same way. They're set up to be a 1 meter by 1 meter plane to give that diffuse light so that we don't get those cast shadows that I was talking about. And yeah, that's probably fine. This is about the same level as it was before, so I'll just hit cancel on that, and we'll do a comparison. So the before and the after. So you can see pretty dramatically, by adding those 2 planes, I've really made it so that I can see my character. The ghost plane is very subtle because we're not getting that reflection, whereas this plane's more dramatic because we're adding that reflection. But we're getting detail in all kinds of places where we weren't getting detail before. We're adding some extra light into this shadow area here so that it's not so dark and heavy. A little bit into the armpit, under the chin, in the eyes. Now, granted, I can change the exposure on these guys. I could also change the size on them, like I showed before, in order to sort of focus them in and make them, whatever I want them to be. So the end result here is that this is the product is designed for this purpose. It's designed for controlling your shadows. When you have your key light, you have your exposure, you have your camera angle, everything is where you want it to be. And the problem is that you just have shadows that are too dark and you want to control them. Now, in this particular case, I could probably drop that umbrella down because it's probably taking too much of the shadow out, and it's probably making it less than ideal in terms of what I want. So maybe I'll just come over here and drop this down to something like, say, 7 from 10, and try that again real quick, and we'll see if that doesn't give me a better look. Oh, and there's one other thing I guess I should do. I'll talk about that in a second after we get this render, so we can compare the before and after. Can the plane names in the scene tab be changed? Well, yes, absolutely, you can change them totally. You definitely can do whatever you want to them. They don't have to remain named autofill plane 1, 2, 3, whatever. And the same goes for the spotlights. The name is just there so that you know what it is. But once you have it in the scene, you can name it, fill light 1, fill light 2, cool, warm, whatever, for you. And I'll show you one other thing, but you can see how much calmer this is now, not so bright. So, that was why I reduced the intensity of the luminance on this, is because I wanted to bring a little bit more of that shadow back in here in particular, but it also affects, every place else that's affected by that. So that's about the same level of convergence as it was before. And yeah, that's a big improvement. You can see we still get some of that moody shadow, but now it's not clogging up in black, and we can actually see what we want to see. We can see the details. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, as far as the purpose of this. Now, that said, let's say that you didn't like the umbrella. Maybe you're like, oh man, I started with the umbrella, but what I really want to add is a ring light to this. Well, there's a way you can do that. It's really simple. There's a couple of things you can do, but the easiest one, the simplest one, and the one that probably will get you where you want to go fastest, is to simply come back over here into your smart content, and under materials, you'll find all the materials that are on these planes in terms of what's available to you in the presets. And at any point in time, if you have a plane selected, you can simply go in there and change the material at any point in time you want. So let's say I want to do a ring light. So I have LD stands for Lighting Designer, OC stands for Outdoor Calibrated, and then the name. And there's 2 ring lights here. I'm going to go ahead and choose ring light 02. And it sometimes helps if you make sure that you have the surface selected. But I'm going to go ahead and double click that. And now we have a ring light. Now, without seeing the iRay preview of that, you won't know that the ring light also has a cutout opacity, which means that we're probably not going to see this on camera. If we did, then we might want to change the distance of the plane, or we could change the size of the plane. So let me just quickly go over here and do an iRay preview so we can see if this is on camera. And if it is, I'll just probably scale it down a bit because I don't want to change the position. Yeah, so you can see we're just seeing a little bit of this here on camera. So the easiest thing to do is just to come over to the properties for that. It looks like I had an autofill plane in here somewhere already, or maybe I clicked on something twice. So let me go ahead and go to parameters and the scale, where autoplane 3 is going to be controlling this circle. So I'm just going to set that to something like 75 and hit tab. Yeah, there's a second plane here somewhere. It looks like I have a ghost plane or something there. So, but you can see that made it small enough to where it's not on camera anymore. Let me just go ahead and turn these guys off because I must have clicked on something twice. So let's turn this one off. Yeah, there we go. You can see the circle right there in the reflection. There was a plane. I must have clicked something twice, and there was a plane there that was blocking it. So I got rid of that, and now you can see this better. So this changes the character, and this is part of the reason why I talked about that gobo at the beginning. And we have so many different options for the various different types of emitters, is that the reflections that are created and just the character of the light overall changes dramatically based on the material that you apply. So if you have the plane in the right place and you just want to change the character of the material, you could load one of those presets. You can also just come over here to surfaces and change any of the settings that you want, including load your own images for the luminance or for the hotspot image, even the cutout opacity. You can really customize heart's content. But that's basically it. That's that's the gist of it. If there's any specific questions, then I'll answer them. But for right now, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Was I wanted to talk about the gobo thing, and in particular, rendering your own luminance image that you can use to create really complex reflections. I wanted to talk about the purpose of using the script, which is to control your shadows, and to some degree to control the reflections, right? Because this is obviously controlling the reflection. And by the way, I guess I should explain. Ring light is often used in photography for creating those ring light reflections in the eyes, and this plugin can definitely be used for that as well. The tricky thing is that positioning reflections can sometimes be weird if the figure isn't looking directly at the camera. Then sometimes you have to put the ring light in a weird position in order to get the reflection where you want it to be. We have been talking, Riversoft Art and I have been talking about the possibility of making a separate plugin that is designed to control the placement of reflections. So it would do exactly the same thing as what this plugin does, more or less, but it would precisely place reflections where you click instead of placing illumination where you click. And that's can be useful as well, particularly for things like the ring lights in the eyes and stuff like that, because it would automatically calculate the proper place to put the plane to get that reflection where you want it to be. That would also be useful in areas like this chrome, but it's different from a fill light because that has reflections, whereas a fill light is all about controlling your shadows. So yeah, I think that's good enough rendering. So let's do our comparison again, before and after. And yeah, if I was trying to do a final render, I would say that that's ready to go. And even with the ghost light, I could obviously change the ghost light. The problem is the ghost light is pretty close and it's on camera. So if you change it to a different material preset, you'll probably end up seeing it on camera, and that may not be what you want. But you can see what I mean about bringing information back into these shadow areas and giving it the fill effect, which is what fill lighting is all about. So that said, I think there's really nothing else to say. Unless you guys have questions, I'll leave it open for questions in case you have any. And if not, then I'll stop this live stream. I'll probably do like a really, really in-depth talk about the shaders at another point in time, because that gets really technical. But hopefully you've seen enough now to know that you can play with them and get some pretty cool effects. Like I said, the gobo one is probably my favorite because it's like so flexible. You can make any image you want into an emitter and have that entirely control your scene. So doing fake doors and doing fake windows, so easy and really, really great for interior scenes. Like let's say you have like a vignette that you see oftentimes on the DAZ store, and it has open walls, and those open walls are black space. I mean, it's just nothing. So in order to create some fake windows, that gobo shader is perfect for adding some fake windows to your vignettes. So if you just get like oftentimes they have like the freebie, the monthly freebie or the weekly freebie for the Platinum Club, and oftentimes you'll find that they're vignette scenes, and they're really, really simple, and they're almost like TV sets or movie sets. And that gobo vignette combination really is powerful because it can make it look like you have a much bigger scene in terms of your geometry, but at the same time it'll render super quick. So great solution for combining that gobo, which is like I said, oftentimes used in TV or movies, combining that gobo with a vignette where you have like a knocked out wall. And normally you would see black space, but you throw a couple gobo windows in there and boom, all of a sudden it looks like you've got this huge, massive set, when the reality of it is all you had was two planes. So good solution for creating much more complex scenes. And then of course you could even then add some ghost planes in order to get the lighting exactly the way you want. And you could get really, really crazy with this, but the primary function is to control the shadows. And then you could always crank up on the surfaces, crank up the luminance, or do whatever else you need to do in order to make the lighting take on a different character and become the key lighting if that's what you wanted. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so I'll probably go ahead and wait for one more second, and then I'm going to go ahead and shut down the stream. But I really appreciate you guys that did come by and ask questions and let me know that things are working right. I'm going to go into the smart content, and I just want to quickly go over which light in this product do you recommend for backlighting? Backlighting's tough, and what I would say is that for backlighting, you might want to use the ghost plane. And the reason why is because the ghost plane doesn't create reflections. Backlighting isn't usually about reflections. Now, the reason why I say not usually is because if it's a metallic object or a really shiny object like car paint, then maybe the ghost plane isn't going to get you where you want to go. Or for like skin, the ghost plane is perfect for a backlight because it can be on camera. Because you have to understand with a backlight, it's almost always directly behind the subject, which means that it's going to be on camera. Unless, of course, you angle the camera down and you have the backlight behind the subject, but you can't see it. That in that case, you can use whatever emitter you want. But if it's going to be on camera, the ghost light is pretty much the only one that I think is suitable for that. Generally speaking, backlighting, or what they call rim lighting, is tricky. It requires careful placement of your light, and a ghost plane is perfect for that, but it won't show the reflections, and that's the problem with it. But for non-reflective surfaces like skin or cloth, the ghost plane may be exactly what you want. And otherwise, you basically just have to experiment and try different angles until you get an angle where you're getting that rim light or that backlight effect where it's not on camera. And the more you do of selecting the polygons to find the placement of the light, the faster it gets. I mean, this is one of those things where I imagine it'll actually be slow at first with people who are first getting used to this workflow, because it's so different from anything that DAZ has ever offered before. But once you get used to it, it'll be like, how did I ever light before? It's so simple. It's like, I want the light to go here, so I click here. You don't have to fiddle around with anything else. It's super, super nice, but as a result, you kind of have to change your way of thinking. So yeah, the ghost plane would be the one I would use. Try first. If that doesn't work for backlighting, then you probably want to change your angle and focus on oblique angles for behind the character, but like say above or below, depending upon where the camera is. So like this camera is really low, so above would be the right choice. But if the camera was really high, then maybe below would be the right choice. Depends on where the camera is. So all the material settings are here in the product. And then under render settings, I talked about this in the video, but there's a studio lighting base. So let me just set this up real quick so that you can see. So I'm gonna new. We don't need that scene anymore. And this is going to change everything. It's going to change the render settings. Particularly, it's going to change the tone mapping. So right now the tone mapping is 13. I'm going to go ahead and change this. You can see immediately the exposure changes to 6.5. The environment's going to get an environment map, and the resolution is changed. And I don't believe there's a ground. Yeah, the ground is off on this. So what you end up with is a really, really empty scene. It's just like an infinity plane grayscale. Oh, what did I do? I must have clicked the wrong thing. Yeah, I must have clicked something wrong. I did not mean to do that. I don't even know what's going on. Ah, jeez. What did I click? I've never even seen this before. Oh, it's in UV view, that's why. Oh, that was interesting. Didn't mean that. Let's go back over here to... Oh, we don't have a camera, that's why. Let's go back over here to iRay. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. A little weird sidebar, but like I said, this is a really empty scene. So if you bring a figure into the scene, it's going to render super quick. There's a infinity plane-like quality to the curve. So you can see, the ground's basically gray, sky is basically a little bit lighter, and there's like a curve in the background. And if you bring a figure or something into the scene, then you're going to have that sort of background, which is great. I mean, it's super fast. It's really easy. I'm just going to throw a primitive in here. So I'm just going to grab a primitive. We'll do a sphere. That's fine. So I've got a sphere. And this is kind of boring because there's no ground, right? So there's nothing for this to reflect off of. So what I can do is I can create a new primitive. And here what I'll do is I'll do plane. I'm going to do it a bit bigger. So I'm going to do something like 10 meters square. Hit accept. And, oh, I didn't check the direction that was pointing in. So that was plane. Let me delete that. And let me try that one more time so you guys can see this. So that was doing Z positive. I want Y positive. There we go. So now we've got a plane on the ground. And, that's good. That's a good start. But now we're creating a hard edge out in space. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that plane, go to surfaces. And then what I can do is I can actually load a texture into the cutout opacity. So any radial gradient would do here. There just so happens to be a radial gradient in this set. So I'm going to go over here to cutout opacity and go to browse. And what I can do is I can navigate to where that is. Now, the simplest thing that I can do in order to quickly browse to the right folder for this is to come over here and just choose that studio base environment. It'll mess things up for a second, but what'll happen is that when I go to browse now, it'll take me right into the folder where all of the textures are for Lighting Designer. And now if I wanted to add a simple radial gradient, the one I would add is hotspot. That's just a simple radial gradient. And what that does is it creates a floor that now fades into that infinity curve. And wherever I'm looking, that'll just fade right in. And so this creates a nice studio environment. So if you're looking for studio type renders, and when I say studio renders, you can make this as bright as you want. So if I set this to something like an EV of 5, you can see it's nice and bright. We're getting a reflection on the ground. And I can change the camera angle, whatever I want. That gray line that you're seeing there, that's just because I have the plane selected. As soon as I click off the plane, you can see that's a really, really great base studio environment. Super simple to set up. It'll be great for like object renders, watches, rings, bottles, anything that you want to take like a product render type of approach. Or if you're doing like a supermodel photo shoot type of thing where they're doing like a fashion shoot, this studio preset is great for that. And like I said, it's as simple as adding just a plane to the ground and then just simply adding to that plane the cutout opacity here. Any radial gradient will be fine, but you can just use one that's already built into the product if you want. And boom, you're off to the races for your studio environment. Super fast, super simple, and really, really easy to work with in terms of Lighting Designer. So that's pretty much it. If there's nothing else, then I think I'm done talking. So I'll say thank you, and I'll keep an eye on the DAZ forums for any future questions, and I'll probably set up something at a later point in time to really dig deep into the shaders, because there's a lot there on the shaders. Now the manual covers it all, so if you really want to understand, you can dig into the manual, and if you have more questions, ask on the forum. I'll check in from time to time and make sure that I answer questions or deal with any problems that might pop up. And want to say again, thank you very much for attending and asking questions and helping me out. And also, I'm sorry for the late start. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my ending soon screen, which I should be seeing that now. So let me switch over to Streamlabs. Yep, everything looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mic.